Joined now by Jeffrey the Greek. If you don't know him, he's a former Iowa player, but just covers Big Ten sports out west of us. I wish I was out west. I was at Iowa earlier this year. Great environment. I knew it was going to be. I had not been there for a football game, but had been gone to Nebraska. I knew it was going to be been at Notre Dame. I knew it was going to be very similar. There are just places, and Iowa is one of those where they just love their football, always have. They've always had a good product, but it's a great environment. When the opposition fans come there, you're going to enjoy yourself, at least until you lose. But up until that point, you're going to have fun because they're great environments, and Iowa's one. Thanks a lot for joining us, Jeff.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We were talking earlier off air, and he played back in the 96 through 2000 era. And I was trying to think, I'm like, oh, yeah, that was the Randall L era. And he brought back some memories for you.
Some haunting memories. Not that. So as I joke on the podcast, I practiced a lot more than I played at Iowa, but I do remember prepping as a defender for Antoine Randall L. And back then, a dual threat quarterback like that was something we'd never seen before. So defensive coaches had not quite adjusted yet to defending guys like that, and he was special.
Absolutely. Enjoyed watching him. The Big Ten this weekend, an unbelievable slate of games of importance. Obviously, we'll talk about Indiana and that. But as I look across just the 7 games that are scheduled, this is it's the first defining week for the Big Ten East, I believe, because you've got Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan State. So there it's kind of like the semifinals. It's almost like a semifinals tournament to see who's going to step up on that. Ohio State's at home to Penn State and Michigan State is at home to Michigan. So those are 2 gigantic games in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I put a updated prediction out on Twitter yesterday, and on what I think the standings are going to finish at the end of the year. Ohio State fans don't like what I have predicted. They've been torching me all last night and into today. I think Michigan will win this weekend versus Michigan State, and if you look at their schedule from there on out, I mean, I'm not just giving them wins. This is college football, but they have a very realistic path to being 11-0 going into the game. But it all starts this weekend. I mean, they've got to get past Michigan State first, and that's just one of the games that are intriguing for the Big Ten. Now, I'm a homer. Every one of these Big Ten games is intriguing to me, but I would think you would put Michigan State at the top.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've seen Michigan State play since they played Indiana, and I'm like, okay, Indiana, if they had a half-competent offense, would have won that game because defensively they were shut down. I haven't really watched Michigan play that much, but just from what I've gleaned from them, they sound like the better team. And having seen Michigan State, I absolutely agree. I think the Wolverines win that game. And, man, if they do, that's really going to does that add up more pressure for Harbaugh going into that game if he's undefeated, going to that Ohio State game since he's not beaten them yet?
I think it takes a little off. I get the feeling that Michigan feels like they're playing with house money right now, or they kind of have all year. So if they can get that, ugly monkey off their back with Michigan State, with them losing to Mel Tucker last year, I think it just opens it up for the rest of the year. And I just want to make sure I say this, like you mentioned, the Indiana-Michigan State game, the Indiana defense did everything they could to muck that up and keep the Hoosiers in it. And I want to make a point, since I know this is a pro Hoosier, audience. I swear I was about the only one that wasn't a Hoosier or Cincinnati fan that watched that Indiana-Cincinnati game. And Indiana was beating the brakes off that Cincinnati team. And I'm still mad at that game. I still think Indiana was the better team coming out of that game. Now they made some mistakes on their own that they have to own up, but a lot of times a season can come down to a game, a series. This season and that game came down to one play, which is when McFadden got thrown out for an absolute BS call. It completely changed that game, perhaps the season for Indiana. I'm not a Hoosier fan. Even I'm still upset about that.
Just rip the scab right off, man. Just rip the scab right off.
I at least wanted to show my support.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it did suck to see that, what it did and how it just, the air went out of there. But yeah. The other big game, of course, Penn State travels to Ohio State. And the odds that I'm looking at, this cannot be right. They're saying it's an 18.5 point game. That's not right, correct?
That's right. You saw some open up at 14.5, and that thing screamed up to 17.5 right after that, and then it's gone up another point.
Is Sean Clifford out?
Well, I think he's in, but he might as well be out if it's the hobbled Sean Clifford we saw last week versus Illinois, and I think that's what you see represented in that line.
And you look at Penn State, and that kind of makes you think of Indiana as well. You lose the important piece of your puzzle, and man, it starts to crumble quick. Yeah.
I mean, in the age of transfer portal and stuff, you would think there would be more backups. I do think James Franklin and the offensive coaches should get a little bit of blame in the fact that they don't have a backup that seems to be ready. It was pretty obvious in that Illinois game early on that Clifford was not healthy. He was doing everything he could to get the ball out of his hands so he wouldn't take a shot. And it's hurt him. I mean, obviously, if you take a quarterback away from any team, as Hoosier fans, I think, can attest to, you're going to limit the offense. And in this case, it has just hurt the whole Penn State team.
Yeah, it absolutely has. Another important game, of course, the Hawkeyes. Your Hawkeyes, they travel up north to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin has been kind of a up and down team this year. The odds, let's see, Wisconsin's a 3.5 point favorite. I guess that's basically because of the home team. But Iowa's their defense had looked so good, and their offense is also another they were competent. They have a competent offense. That's the difference between them and Indiana. Great defense, competent offense, and they've been able to get by a lot. But that's not enough to beat the really good teams. Wisconsin's not one of those really good teams. I think that they should be able to beat Wisconsin, even though it's on the road. But that's going to be an interesting game.
A non-Iowa fan calling Iowa's offense competent is about the best compliment we can get at this point. It looked pretty incompetent for most of the game versus Penn State and the entire game versus Purdue. I mean, over-under set at 36.5 for this game.
Unbelievable.
Typically only see that when two Service Academy offenses get together. That's what we got in Madtown on Saturday. I don't know how Iowa's going to move the ball. I'm very curious to see that. Same could be said about Wisconsin, but their rushing attack, they've got a two-headed monster now running back, and it's really come alive the last 2 or 3 weeks. So as of right now, the thing that I feel most confident about for both Iowa and Wisconsin, rushing, passing for both teams, is Wisconsin's rushing attack. So I tend to lean towards Wisconsin, but the hope is, as an Iowa fan, that Iowa can get back to doing what they do best, which is turning people over. And Mertz has been more than happy to turn the ball over this year. So that's what it's going to take for Iowa to pull that win out.
Some other non-really important games. Purdue goes to Nebraska. That'll be interesting just for whatever it is. Minnesota goes to Northwestern. Rutgers to Illinois. Well, there's the pillow fight game of the week. And then, of course, Indiana traveling to Maryland. This is a must-win game, absolutely must-win game for Indiana, and pretty close to a must-win game for Maryland, only because their schedule gets a lot tougher. They have to play 3 of the Big Ten East ranked teams, Michigan State, Michigan, and Penn State, I believe, yet, which I don't see them beating any of those 3, unless they get lucky with Penn State. But so both teams need to win this game. Indiana is going to have to do it with a walk-on quarterback, probably, who I have no idea what this is going to look like, because up till now the offense didn't look that great with their starting quarterbacks. So now that you have a walk-on in there, I don't know the changes they're going to be able to make. Haven't had much of a running game. The offensive line, even though it's a veteran core, been pretty disappointing this season. It's all you can say. And it's just been a very benign offense, without any teeth. Of course, against last week we saw Jack Tuttle against Ohio State. Great series, 75 yards. They go down the field, they score a touchdown, and he gets hurt on that play. We don't know how it would have played out after that. Not saying that they would have won, but they looked good. They ran a great scheme all the way down and scored, but that's all poof gone now.
Yeah, as far as this game, when I was at Iowa, I played under a head coach named Hayden Fry, big Texan, and he always used to say, "You got want to, Jim. You got want to work out. You got want to come to practice."
Yep.
For Maryland, Indiana, it's going to come down to want to. Like, which team wants this the most? With Maryland, they're known for an explosive offense, but they haven't scored more than 20 points versus an FBS team since week 1. And that was versus West Virginia when West Virginia turned the ball over 4 times. An interesting thing to watch with locks in these games is in each game, they go right down the field. He can draw up plays during the week to attack a defense, and he's excellent at it. But somewhere around season or series 2 or 3, the defensive coordinator adjusts, and Locks has had no answer. So that's what I think we will see in this game. Shout out to my podcast, the Eyes on Big podcast. But we do a lock of the week. My lock of the week is actually the under in this game because
really,
because I still have faith in the Indiana defense. I believe they have pride, under their head coach. I still think Maryland is trying to figure out who they are after losing a couple of their studs. But on the other side, Maryland's defense ain't that bad either. And right now it's just difficult for me to see points being put on the board by Indiana with a inexperienced quarterback behind that offensive line. You can have one of the greatest play callers in the world. If you take out the O-line and the quarterback, the offense is going to come to a screeching halt. And I think that's what we've seen, in the last couple of weeks with Indiana.
Yeah, it's just been so, like I mentioned, the offensive line, they're veterans. It was a veteran group coming back. They did lose Harry Kreider, a big loss. But other than that, they got, I think Zach Carpenter came in. So should have been no drop off. And the fact that there's been such a huge drop off has been mesmerizing because they haven't been. And you got Stephen Carr, who is a solid running back, and he's done an okay job. But if I look back at all the stats, the first half, he's pretty good. He's probably up 4, maybe to 5 yards to carry. But by the end of the game comes, that usually drops down to 3 or below.
Right.
And that running game is just disappearing. So so if you're not having a running game, obviously you're probably not getting good pass protection either, which has been the case. So they're going to have to find something they haven't found. And I don't know if I don't even know what it's going to entail because it's really difficult to change your offense midstream this late into the season with guys that probably hasn't even run much offense except for scout team offense. So It's going to be a challenge for Indiana, but 49.5 points, that's a lot. So either one of those teams, for those two teams, yes, I probably agree with you on that. What's any locks? What are your locks for the week?
That's one. I tell you what, I like a lot of unders. Minnesota Northwestern, I think that's an under to look at. That's an under 42. I don't know if I would call it a lock, but I mean, I'm getting deep here, but Ohio State's team total points scored, I believe, is 37. I think they can score 40 points getting off the bus right now if they want to. So that's another one to look at. But in general, as soon as the lines come out Monday or whatever, just go to the Big Ten and bet all unders. You would be something like 65, 70% up this year by just blind betting the unders. Indiana and Iowa, and we're not the only teams that have been struggling with O-line and quarterback play. It's pretty much been across the board.
Yeah, and it really it sucks really because I was looking forward to seeing all those teams be good. It's so fun when they're good. I mean, but opening up at Iowa, that's one thing in the Big Ten I think they have to get away from. And I try to not be a homer. Indiana has really gotten screwed in that case. It's a couple of years ago, they opened up with Ohio State. This year they opened up with Iowa. They opened up with Ohio State again, I think, in a couple of years. And then they have another opening game in a few more years. This was Iowa's first Big Ten opening opponent since 1979 against Indiana. And I'm like, what, dude, why would they do that? And that just doesn't help the product, I don't think. You're not
especially coming off the big year last year and wanting to, grab that momentum and going. And then suddenly you looked at Indiana's schedule. They open up on the road in a tough environment, if I could be so bold, with Iowa Stadium.
Very tough.
Right. And then you turn around at Cincinnati and you started looking at it and you're like,
Who's scheduled that game?
I mean, the best part about Indiana right now is they've already played Iowa, Cincinnati, Michigan State, Ohio State. They've got some of their toughest games in the rearview mirror, which just brings it right back to this game here. Like, I think in order for Tommy Allen to keep some momentum, you at least want to go bowling. You're not going to go to a bowl if you lose this game. It's a big game for the Hoosiers.
It absolutely is, and I'm looking forward to watching that. See, anything else? Make sure we get your shout out on your podcast, John. If you got that, to stick it up. If not, we'll make sure we post it up there. But man,
Awesome.
I'd love to have you back anytime, Jeff. It's fun. It's just been fun. So I'd love to have you back anytime.
Hey, wake me up in the middle of the night. I'll talk some Big Ten football. Don't
right, brother. Hey, Eyes on Big podcast. Make sure you follow it. Jeffrey the Greek, make sure you give him a follow as well. We appreciate him. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.